Hey all, we are going to get into chapter 14 of section 5, which is homing pigeons, listening to the inaudible. In this chapter, what Gopal talks about is there are a lot of circumstances or situations where leaders bring in a lot of transformational initiatives into the company, changes and things like that. But what Gopal says is it is important for them to listen to the signals or the infra sounds, the very minute sounds inside the company, and then take decisions accordingly. That's the broader message. To this effect, he basically gives an example of a pigeon race and says a very interesting story. So, what Gopal says is on 29th June 1997, a great race was held to celebrate the centenary of the Royal Pigeon Racing Association. More than 60,000 homing pigeons were released at 6:30 a.m. from a field in Nantes, southern France, flying to lofts all over southern England, 650 to 800 km away. By 11 a.m., the majority of the racing birds had made it out of France and were over the English Channel. They should have arrived at their lofts by early afternoon. They did not. A few thousand of the birds straggled in over the next few days. Most were never seen again. In pigeon racing terms, the loss of so many birds was practically unheard of, a disaster. Any one bird could get lost, but tens of thousands? A researcher at the US Geological Survey, Jonathan Hackstrom, came up with a novel suggestion. Studying this event, he noticed a key fact. At 11 a.m., when the racing pigeons were crossing the channel, a Concorde supersonic transport airliner was flying along the channel on its morning flight from Paris to New York. During flight, the SST, the aircraft, generates a shock wave that pounds down towards the earth, a carpet of sound almost 160 km wide. The racing pigeons flying below the Concorde could not have escaped the intense wave of sound. The birds that did eventually arrive at their lofts were lucky enough to be very slow racers. They were still south of the channel when the SST passed over ahead of them. This story is interesting. The lost pigeons seem to bear resemblance to the very well known, successful transformational leaders who get it all wrong in a new company context or environment. So, what Gopal says is organizational leaders can learn what has enabled pigeons for several centuries to navigate long and uncertain distances reliably. There are lessons for them because managers have to lead their people through long stretches of change and uncertainty. I set out to find out a bit about the history and hearing capabilities of the pigeon. So basically, after this, Gopal talks about a lot of history, how pigeons, ever since history, have been used for postal services, how they never lose track and things like that, which is not something we need to worry about. But what is important is how it applies to management. Metaphorically, when company leaders take initiatives and communicate with their staff, the sound frequency is in the audible range. When these sounds bounce off the departments, factories, and clusters of interest groups, they produce an echo. The echo is not in the audible range, it is in the infra range called infrasound. For a leader to be able to listen to this infrasound, he has to extend his hearing range and ability. That is why it is important to understand the company geology because it is that geology that creates unique sounds in response to its leaders' initiatives. Each change case is unique because the sounds reflected from the cliffs of each organization are different. Echoes reflected from the cliffs are unlikely to be clear or focused. Then Gopal talks about different organizations and things like that. But the point is, what is infrasound listening? What is that? So, to give one example of that, he gives an example of Lal Bahadur Shastri, our former Prime Minister of India, and he says, mm, so yeah, here is the part. I'm taking a bit of pause. Sorry. Russian leader Alexei Kosygin visited the milk cooperative in Anand, Gujarat in March 1979. While he was impressed with the work done, he was appalled that it had taken 30 years to accomplish. He told Dr. Kurian, "You have taken 30 years to do this for the milk sector. Presumably, you will take another 30 years to do the same thing with the oil seeds sector, and then another 30 years to do it for cotton and jute. If it were Russia, they would shoot you down before you got the job done." So, what Gopal says is this is from a Russian context where the Indian politician and administrator cannot ignore society's infrasound, which at that time the Russian system did. So, the Russian made that comment. But this was in 1979 after the plant was set and things like that. But the most important thing is Gopal says how it all happened in Amul in Gujarat. Operation Flood, which ushered in the milk revolution in India, owes its fame to a visit by Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri to Anand in the 1960s. If you don't know, Anand is a place in Gujarat where Amul started. Instead of staying at the house instead of staying at the house of Dr. Kurian, there being no hotels or guest houses in Anand, he expressed the desire to spend the night at the house of a farmer in Kaira district. This caused consternation among security personnel and logistical complications for the organizers. To keep it a secret, one village farmer was initially told that two foreigners would stay with him. Only at the last minute was he told that the guests would be Prime Minister and the Gujarat Chief Minister. Shastriji had an early dinner with the nervous farmer and then went around the village talking to the people. Most of the villagers kept awake as Shastriji visited the colonies of Harijans, Muslims, and all the others. At each place, he inquired about the milk cooperative of which they were members. This went on from 8 p.m. till 2 a.m. Next morning, he asked Kurian to explain the secret of Amul's success. Nowhere else in the country had cooperatives worked. Kurian explained the ground realities succinctly. Shastriji heard what he could not have gathered in many papers and seminars sitting in Delhi. It was a unique way for a modern leader to listen to the infrasound of what mattered to dairy farmers. Leaders who fail to listen fail. So there are a lot of examples for this actually, but I'm not reading through all this. But I'll give you one example. So another corporate example of a pigeon getting lost in the subsonic waves is the case of Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC. In the late 1970s, this company led the way with its small and mid-range computers. Its smartest managers and customers, it has been reported, fed back information to the company that huge changes were occurring through the emergence of new markets like personal computing, software, and systems integration. These would make the current business model of the company obsolete. However, according to the top team and CEO Ken Olsen, the company had reached the top because of the focused development of its own technology and no doubt the hard work of its employees. But good ideas could not come out in the open and get discussed more broadly. Several top managers quit because Digital Equipment Corporation did not find it necessary or worthwhile to adapt to the emerging signals. Within 2 decades, DEC was on its knees and Compaq bought it. A mighty fall for a market leader during whose peak Microsoft was an unknown entity. Why leaders find it difficult to listen? Listening carefully is such an elementary lesson. Why does one have to explain its importance? Precisely because it is elementary and life's mistakes are made by ignoring elementary things. Then again, here Gopal talks about a CEO who never listened and how he lost business and all that. I'm not getting into it. Leo Tolstoy wrote in Anna Karenina that happy families are all alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Likewise, all change management cases resemble each other, but in reality, each one is unique to the prevalent culture, beliefs, and mindsets. There is no one hat fits all solution. Listening carefully to the unique infrasound of the organization, however, is the most valuable tool. So, the basic thing is listen to the signs in the organization, talk to people, understand what the challenges are that might help us to identify things better. With that being said, we end chapter 14. We'll move on to chapter 15, which is the intelligently stupid vervet. Vervet is a type of monkey, and the subheader is folly of missing the context.